G'day guys, we're here at GCG Turbochargers in Sydney who are going to be taking a look at the pair of second-hand turbos that Scotty's bought for the Carnage MX5.7. They're XR6 turbo units, they're Garrett GT3540s, but they're a bit second-hand, so we're hoping the GCG can rebuild them and rescue them for us. Let's head inside and see how the magic happens.
Hey boys,
how are you, mate?
Good, mate.
What's the story with these turbos?
The $50 eBay turbos.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've got some bad news for you. They're not the greatest units, but come on through. We'll give you a bit of detail on what makes a turbo not work.
Okay, sounds good.
So here's your turbos boards. This is our turbo technician, Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Nice to meet you.
We'll give you some details on what to look for when you're buying a second-hand turbo.
Sure. So basically the biggest problem that we get is people walk in the door and they think they're going to save money by buying turbos from a wrecker. It's not the case. The majority of the time they come in, they look like this. GT3540s or 3582s as they're known, off a Ford Falcon, a lot of them struggle with oil pressure. Oil starvation just destroys these turbos. So in this case, it's exactly the same. Both your turbos are exactly the same. The oil starvation, it destroys the bearing cages and the bearings themselves. And what that does is in turn, it sends it out of balance and the wheels just plough the housings and write themselves off basically. So we're going to have to upgrade entirely to a new turbo. And what we're going to do there is we're going to step up into the GTW range. Now this is a 3684 and it's basically the same geometry as a 3582, very similar sizes, but you know, more modern technology, billet compressor wheel, larger compressor cover, things like that. So what we're going to use is we're going to use a 0.82 turbine housing from a GT35. And the reason we're using these is with the GTWs, it's not as easy to get the exact air ratio that you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of build a bit of a hybrid here and we're going to use a GT35 turbine housing. We're going to use this adapter flange, which what that does is it lifts the deck height of the profile away from the seat area, which will allow us to use the GTW or TO4 style bearing housing. We're going to tell Scotty that he's absolutely wasted $50 and we're going to throw them straight in the trash and move on with our new builds. Now, I've got a turbo here and a turbo here, both exactly the same. Now this one's in pieces and what we're going to do today is we're going to assemble it. I'm going to show you the process of assembling a turbocharger and balancing a turbocharger in a high-speed balance machine. So let's get into it.
Before we get started, would you mind taking us through a bit of turbocharger anatomy?
Yeah, sure, no problems. I've got a GX55 cutout here. So the key parts of a turbocharger are the turbine housing, which is obviously connected to the manifold of the engine. The bearing housing, which contains the internal parts, ball bearing, standard bearing, you know, all the things that are internal. The compressor cover, which in this case is a surge slotted unit, and the billet compressor wheel. This is called a 10-0 compressor wheel. So what happens there is that the first number represents how many primary blades it has, and the secondary number represents a secondary blade. On this particular compressor wheel, there isn't secondary blades, so it's called a 10-0. Basically, this is where the turbocharger is bolted to the manifold. The wasted exhaust gas from the engine comes through the turbine housing, spins the turbine wheel, and I'll show you the front. It'll spin the compressor wheel, and what that does, it pulls the air in the front, it actually compresses it and pushes it out the outlet here into the engine. And that's how we make positive pressure or PSI.
Awesome. Let's get stuck into putting our second turbo together.
Let's do it. So we'll start off, we've got a bearing housing, obviously stripped down without the bearing cages inside. What I'm first going to do is install the turbine wheel and the bearings. It's essential to always use oil, as much oil as you can. So basically once the bearing pack is in, the retainer's in, the bearing pack's not going to fall out, turbine wheel's not going to fall out. We can now put the back plate on with the collar. just come and hold that tight. You don't have to hold the turbo on, just the bearing housing.
Okay.
Just got to make sure the compressor wheel and the shaft move together. A little bit more. Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into the balancing process of the centre housing. We've got two high-speed balancing machines here, so we install the turbo as it would be on a vehicle. We spin it up to operating speeds and just make sure that the balance is in tolerance. What that does is prevents bearing wear or premature failure down the track, because we obviously want this thing to make numbers for as long as we can.
So does that basically prime the turbo?
Yeah, basically. I just want to make sure there's oil in there before I start spinning it, because obviously once I spin it to 100,000 RPM, if it doesn't have oil in it, we're going to know about it.
Sure.
MX5.7. Carnage. Let's do it. So that's first balance right there, and we're already inside tolerance.
Awesome.
Being a brand new unit, majority of the time that's going to happen. You know, I could bring that down even further if I wanted to, but with the application that it is, it doesn't need to be any lower, and we're ready to roll. So the next step of the build is we're going to take this 0.82 GT35 turbine housing, using an adapter ring. We're going to do a high flow in the lathe, and we're going to make it work with our GTW3684. Let's go. Just clocking up the turbine housing, making sure it's going to be concentric with the seat. So we're just checking the tip height of the turbine wheel. So it's got that slight tickle there. So it's close, but not enough. With the bigger cube engines, especially when you're looking at an LS or something that you're going to bang limiter all the time, you're better off opening up the profile a bit.
Yeah, sure.
It just reduces that chance of smashing the housing.
Yep.
And that's it, we're ready to rock and roll.
Unreal.
Basically all we've got to do now is assemble it and get it on the car.
Cool.
When you get to the point where you want to fit it onto the car, you just got to loosen these bolts, rotate the housings and tighten them back up where you want, and that's it. Orientation is very important for a bearing housing. You just want to make sure the oil is flowing properly, and yeah, that's it. Cool. I've got them pre-tagged, so they're ready to go. So
it's pretty typical where cars are concerned that not everything goes according to plan. And unfortunately for us in this instance, our second-hand $50 turbos were junk. Fortunately for us, Alex and the guys at GCG have hooked us up with this sweet pair of GTW36s. We've got to see the process of assembling one of these turbos, which was awesome. We hope you guys have learned a bit about turbochargers. Basically, all that's left to do is ship them down to Scotty and see how they look hanging off our built LS1 engine.